is I had my own, personal background of moving around and around. My mom is also born in India, so my grandparents were expats as well.
That's a fantastic background.
Yes. So I sort of grew up with many cultures in my presence. And then when I started working as a private counsellor in Moscow, I could see that despite all those different nationalities, there were some common traits. I did another master in cultural sociology as well, and all my research were around expatriation and highly qualified professionals.
How do loneliness and perfectionism show up in the lives of the high achievers?
Good perfectionism is the one that sort of make you achieve something and do it really well, and that you're not satisfied with a good grade. You want an extra good grade, for example. But then it's bad perfectionism. That's when it paralyzes you, that you withhold yourself from doing things because you don't want to fail. And often, you can see that perfectionists, when they have to deliver up to deadlines, a lot of perfectionists don't do it before they end, because then they don't have time to think about how to use their methods to support people how to do it. But it's very important that you do feel the pain, because you cannot force happiness after trauma.
This can reach the awareness of actually having a problem. That means the pain inside as such that is within you. It's not that if you change the place or the country or the city, whatever, the pain just disappears. So it's just that I personally believe that there is no other way that going through it,
if you have experienced trauma, the body remembers. And that means that there might be triggers that reactivate the trauma. And when you know that this is a trigger and it reactivates, then it's not that dangerous. It doesn't mean that you won't be sad or, feel grief or anything like that, but it means that you understand what's going on when.
Hello to everyone. Today I'm joined by Sidsel Hansen, an expat counselor and psychologist who has spent more than 20 years supporting internationals through transition, trauma, anxiety, and the emotional weight of living between cultures. So I'm really grateful to have you here, Sidsel, today. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I'm excited, but also a little bit, this is out of my comfort. So usually I listen and then I give advice. Here it's me talking all the time. So it's a bit different than usually.
So what originally inspired you to focus your work on supporting internationals and expat, actually?
Yeah, so I lived abroad 6 times myself. And the last time when I moved, I worked as a counselor, a psychology counselor in Denmark for the Danish government. And then when I was expatriated to Moscow because of my husband's work, I was a trailing spouse, and this is great, now I can just follow along. And then at the school where my children, the international school my children went to in Moscow, they were in need of Western trained counselors and psychologists. So they were, please, we have an office, can we send clients to you? So that's how it came about, like a coincidence. I was trailing spouse, expatriated to a new country, and then just by coincidence they gave me a room, and then they sent students and staff and parents, and that's why I started working professionally with it. One thing is I had my own personal background of moving around and around. My mom is also born in India, so my grandparents were expats as well.
That's a fantastic background.
Yes. So I sort of grew up with many cultures in my presence. And then And then when I started working as a private counselor in Moscow, I could see that despite all those different nationalities, there were some common traits. And that's so. While I was expatriated, I did another master in cultural sociology as well, and all my research were around expatriation and highly qualified professionals moving abroad. So one thing is that I was working with my counseling practice, and then I was doing all the research on the side, and then being an expat myself. So.
Wow. And how was it as an experience, considering that you were living there in Russia?
It was very interesting. It was usually because, at least from Western countries, a lot of people think that it's a dangerous place to be. Obviously, it is now. At that time, it was just before the annexation of Crimea. So there was a very, like we invest in the country, and that means peace. Whereas today it's a totally different situation. But that also means that the professionals that I was working with were very skilled, but they also had a specific persona. That at that time it still is considered a hardship place, so a dangerous place to be expatriated, and that means that when you are expatriated, you have to have some specific skills, interpersonal skills of that you have high risk personality when you're expatriated to those to countries that are considered hardships. So that's why I also have additional training in something called National Victim Assistance, which is, if you do like crisis interventions for like kidnapping or if somebody is being killed or evacuation. So a lot of my work was also when the war broke out in 2022. I was at that time repatriated to Denmark, but I was still working with a lot of my clients in Moscow. So I had to evacuate because, all the diplomats had to leave. Everybody had 48 hours. I mean, not the diplomats, but the diplomats' families had to leave. And all the global leaders, for corporates also had to leave with their families. So everybody was sent to Dubai because there was a lot of companies sent there. Not everybody, but a lot of companies sent their staff to Dubai until they had a new posting for them. So that was so I did a lot of evacuation at that time with families that needed
a complex situation to live in.
Absolutely, and I see that obviously, because when I started working, specifically with expatriation, I also grouped my clients into, because I could see that there was some specific things with like diplomats. They have their contract is usually 3 years, and then in April they give up a new country, and then they send that very generically. Corporates, and usually the diplomats are also taken care of in the sense of, if they have children, school start is important, so a lot of them move, in the summer, so children can be in school. Then, when I have corporate clients, it's the corporate
dynamic.
Yeah, and it's also like, okay, we have to set up a factory in Saudi or something, and that means that's in April, so we need to move in April. And a lot of time it's less transparent, usually it's also like a contract of 2, 3, 5 years, but then as soon as the contract starts ending, then usually the corporate has a year to find a new place or negotiate a new contract in somewhere else. And that if the person comes with a family, it's a very, very stressful time because there's a lot of unknowns.
Yeah, so that was my point exactly. Yeah. I can't even imagine the stress that you have been through, and your family as well, including the kids.
Yeah, so so if you look at, that sort of subculture within the expatriation, they are under a lot of pressure when contracts are being negotiated and if they send a new postings. And then you have, like with NGOs, for example, like UN umbrella, it's the same, it's also short-term contracts and needs to be up for negotiation, which also impacts, of course, the person, but also if partner and children. And then, of course, then you have the trailing spouses, right? Or trailing partners. What does that mean to follow, a diplomat or follow a corporate and NGOs? And then you have academia as well. That's the same. Obviously, being internationals, all of them, there are some common traits. Hannah Nash, which is like a Swedish sociologist, he talks about this cosmopolitan, that, they have high cultural competence. And that means that, if you want to find somebody you want to send abroad as an organization, then you have to find somebody who clicks off that high cultural competence, which is a sort of a newer way of looking at expats, whereas there's also somebody called Cohen who looks at the neo-colonial expat, which is very much like colonial style, but also the neo-colonial is more like you expatriated, you go from, you live in an expat bubble, you only stay in the same hotels and things like that. So there are differences within the whole expatriated community. There are different ways, of course, of thinking about what is expatriation for me. And then if we look at Denmark, for example, you have a huge wave of internationals who want to stay and who's more for the migration part of it, or the immigration. So there's also different needs there.
Well, a lot of internationals in Denmark currently, to be honest, since I'm among them, I noticed that they are choosing at the end or a certain point in that way to go in their home country, back in their home country for one reason or another, but mainly because, to be honest, because they don't succeed to integrate themselves into the Danish society. Why not doing something that might actually keep them here?
I think it's also how we talk about it, right?
Yeah.
It's like, are you somebody who wants to be retained? Are you somebody who wants to move? Or, are you here for personal reasons? Because obviously in Denmark, corporate expat package or your diplomat, it's time limited, and then you live by that, and you also do it because there are like economically benefits of moving from country to country. There's like your career is also, you are a GM in one country, and then you go and then you're a regional manager and things like that. So it's also that demography might not be the ones that you want to retain in Denmark, because you don't want to stay anyway. And that's not part
but I was talking in general. I mean, those who might actually be also willing to stay in Denmark, but at some point they find themselves of really choosing or being forced by themselves, of course, to return to their home country because they didn't really succeed to integrate into the Danish society. It is a really totally different type of culture. It is very hard to penetrate as such, but it's just hard because it's hard to understand. Takes more time. That's what I'm trying to say in short. I do believe that, and you have to be patient. Give yourself time to get some friends.
Because I work with expats worldwide, and I see the same,
patterns, kind of.
Yes, I mean, and that's why I made this model of, like loneliness is one of the top 10 challenges.
Yes, it is.
And when I work with clients who express loneliness, then then I always, because loneliness can sustain you and make, it makes you feel stuck. Whether if it's in Denmark, in your home country, or in another country.
Yes, definitely.
And then I look at, okay, but usually we have 5 subcultures that expats sort of, or internationals, need to navigate in and out of. It's the host country, then it's the expat community in that country, then it's their country of origin, and then it's their family or work or study or school or interest groups if it's a trailing partner. And then I always look at, like structurally, is there a place where you don't feel lonely? Who can you identify with? Where do you feel a sense of belonging? Because if you feel lonely or feel that you don't belong in any of those 5 places, then of course that's devastating. And then we of course need to look at, are there some underlying factors of the reason why you feel stuck in everywhere. But very often people don't feel stuck everywhere. And then we focus on, okay, so that can be sort of, a validation of that it's not, loneliness is not here. You are okay. Because often, if you feel lonely, then you are sad, of course, and then you can feel that you're lonely everywhere. And then another thing that we, talked briefly about before the interview was, like a lot of highly qualified professionals are, within the intellectual gifted. And a part of being intellectually gifted also means that you often can feel isolated. And is that like a core thing that you will feel forever? Or is it also a thing that you need to, see, okay, but isolation, is that a choice? Or is it because I need to figure out when I don't feel isolated? Because it's also quite overwhelming always to be with people or finding new friends or,
Absolutely, I agree.
It can be very, very hard in the long run always to be out there to look for something. And for some people actually it can be liberating to be in a different country because they don't have all those expectations, so they can actually be who they want to be and act the way that they want to be.
Lately I was reading a book, one of my favorite authors, Gabor Mate, The Myth of Being Normal. And I actually find something, so he says that it depends on how people are able to process their loss, what support they might reach out for and receive. Do you think that regarding the emotional spectrum?
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah, if you keep suppressing your emotions, then of course you will develop some coping mechanisms that are always helpful for you. And especially if we talk about internationals and expats who have like high demanding job and are considered high achievers. I also see something which is really interesting. Often the ones that I work with who are stressed or close to burnout or have burned out, then when we go back and look at some of the things why they have achieved so well is because they have also been really good at suppressing things and focus on the task. And that's actually not a bad thing if you need to deliver. But it can be a bad thing in the
long-term thing.
Yeah. So often then we always work with, it's a tool that you have that when you need to deliver or achieve something, then you can do that. But you don't need to do it in other aspects of your life. Because often, that's why, for example, stress or burnout emerges, is that it's dualistic, right? It's both a super skill and it's also a skill that actually make you sick or ill. So then we look at, that super skill, you use that super skill when appropriate, and then you do the emotional work in appropriate situations.
So how can someone recognize when they are emotionally stuck or disconnected? So that is particularly kind of connected to the burnout somehow. How can we recognize the patterns?
One of the things is you get more forgetful, you can be more irritated, or you can have more conflicts, but you can also withdraw and isolate yourself. It depends on your personality, but you will always see a personality shift into something that is different from how you are when you're not burned out. A lot of people, when they get more sick, because it also impacts their nervous system and their immune system.
Yeah, so that's what I meant, the immune system, of course, and you get sick or ill or whatever,
then you can have those psychosomatic complaints. And these also often in relation to transition when people are moving around. So that could be one example. And you can also get more anxious. You can feel depressed. And often, when somebody is really stressed, you have similar symptoms. You might not sleep well, or you might sleep a lot more than you usually do. You might eat more or eat less. You might drink more or not drink. You might exercise more or not exercise. Whereas, more like when you see it as like a behavioral change,
signals,
then you know, unless it's I have decided I want to go more to the gym, for example. but when it's more like on the things that you're doing it to cope with something.
So what role does self-compassion play in building emotional resilience?
Well, it a lot. Because one thing is, often with resilience, there's like corporate resilience that, I referred to before, right? That you can suppress and you can deliver, which is like a super skill in an organization or workplace or anything. But then there's also resilience as when you have experienced something traumatic or something that didn't make you feel good, then what do you do then? It's not, resilience is not like avoiding it, thinking that it didn't happen. It's recognizing it and then, going on from there with that with you. For example, when I work with people who lost a partner, for example, then we also look at, grief. It's like grief will always look, how do I do it? Like grief will always look like this, but then you will build on the grief. It's not like grief disappears. It will stay there, but you will grow.
So we have talked just earlier about a tiny bit about loneliness, but how do loneliness and perfectionism show up in the lives of the high achievers? What it means to be a neurodivergent? For those who actually might be interested of just knowing what it means being a neurodivergent and how or what are the kind of quoting the symptoms that actually can characterize like a person being a neurodivergent.
Loneliness and neurodivergent and perfectionism. Okay, if we start with perfectionism, often when I work with people, we talk about like what is good perfectionism and what is bad perfectionism. The good perfectionism is the one that sort of, make you achieve something and do it really well. And, that you're not satisfied with a good grade. You want an extra good grade, for example. But when then it's bad perfectionism, that's when it paralyzes you, that you withhold yourself from doing things because you don't want to fail. And often, you can see it at, perfectionists when they have to deliver up to deadlines. A lot of perfectionists don't do it before they end and then you work like 72 hours in a row and then they deliver, because then they don't have time to think about how they actually feel because they have the deadline so close. Whereas when they develop better coping skills, then they do it on a more like
linear, like more,
yeah, and when perfectionism has gone really bad, then it's the isolating yourself from other people, and then that of course can be a very lonely thing to be. But I also think that some, like I see, for example, in Denmark, so and so many young people are lonely, and so, I don't really recall the numbers yet, but where loneliness is actually a core feeling that we all have. It's not dangerous, and just the way that people describe the word, like, oh, you're lonely, or loneliness, among, it's almost like, oh, if I feel lonely, then something is wrong with me. But I mean, loneliness is something that we all encounter at some point in our life, and at time spans in our life that it's normal to feel lonely.
You can also be in company of other people and still feel lonely, like literally. Wonderful thing, opportunity for me, from my point of view. I'm single for years now, and every time, and I'm not overreacting, every time I'm saying I'm single for years now, nobody believes me, and it's just like, oh, you don't feel lonely. Give myself time for myself and with myself. It's such an important and must-have tool for me that gives me so much joy and so much fulfillment and so much knowledge about myself. I discover so many things every time. It's about bonding with yourself, right? Going deeper within yourself, not outside yourself. So it's an inner work. The inner work, I'm just willing constantly to do that, because I just love to not be the same version of myself. Even like yesterday, I love and enjoy to learn new things, meet new people, extraordinary people. What can we do when we feel like we are constantly starting over?
One of the things if we're talking specifically with expatriation, then I would recommend, looking at those 5 subcultures that are always present in a person who lives an international lifestyle, and see if we can find somewhere where you do feel that you belong. And of course, when you constantly feel that you need to start over and over and over again, then there might be some underlying factors that we should look into.
So what does it truly mean to feel at home? Is it a place? Is it a feeling, or something else?
It's very different from people to people.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And I think that's also why, what I do in my work, it's what I always do is to work with a client on what is the best possible life for you in the context that you live in. So that means if I would be working with you, for example, then that's what we would look at. If I would be working with somebody else, that's what we would be looking at. So I think it refers to also, so where would you feel home in your specific context, and which the interpersonal skills that you come with.
Trauma can often show up while you're having a broad experience, for example.
For example, if you have experienced trauma, the body remembers. And that means that there might be triggers that reactivate the trauma. And when you know that this is a trigger and it reactivates, then it's not that dangerous. It doesn't mean that you won't be sad or, feel grief or anything like that, but it means that you understand what's going on when it happens. If you look at TCKs, third culture kids, but also ATCKs, which is adult third culture kids, then you can see, if you look at a normal population, or a normal population which have grown up in their country of origin, then 2 out of 10 will have, adverse childhood experience. If you look at TCKs, then 4 out of 10 will have. So that means a lot of preventive work needs to be done into how can you support people who live abroad with understanding themselves and their triggers more. And because when you do move abroad a lot, you are under extreme pressure every time you move. So that's what happens, and then of course the lack of network until you have reactivated or found your network. And actually a lot of my clients that I work with who have lived in many different places have a huge worldwide network that is just as closely tied as people who have grown up and live in their country of origin. And they have very strong and warm relationship, the internationals, who are the same in country of origin. They just don't live in the same soil, right? so internationals, and that also, because now we have access to each other all over the world. For example, when my grandparents were expatriated to India, it was a different time, right? It was letters, it was, and they had to be shipped and long, it took long. Whereas today, the accessibility to people you miss is much more easy. And also, if you look at younger people who have grown up with Wi-Fi, for them, the real world and the digital world is the same. Whereas for me, I'm in a different generation.
Yeah.
The digital world and my physical work is different. They're very separated.
The same for me, honestly, yeah.
Yeah. So that also, of course, has an impact on, your social life and how you approach that.
How can someone actually begin to notice when a reaction comes from past pain rather than just the present moment? How can they recognize those patterns?
If you have been in a car crash and something smelt of rubber, burned rubber, for example,
Mm-hmm.
so then you might, every time you smell burned rubber, be reminded of this. And you might not first understand what's going on until you realize that this is the trigger. Or if you have been in an abusive relationship and you are not there anymore, then if you meet something that is similar to that, it might reactivate that feeling of you being a victim, even though that's not what's going on. So then we work structurally with this belongs to this, this belongs to this. So it's very much about structuring and then understanding what has happened in the past and how you separate the past from the present, but also understand that in the present you still have a scar of what happened. I mean, the example I showed with the grief before is similar to that. But of course, if you have had
Elaborated, yeah.
Yeah, but if you have had a very traumatic experience and you haven't, worked with it, then it can still be a wound, but without you knowing.
Yeah.
So I think the difference is, when I work with people who, like with bereavement, for example, then we also look at healthy grieving process and unhealthy grieving process. That the necessary pain.
A lot of people, really a lot, I still see and hear that they are avoiding pain. You cannot avoid pain.
Yeah, but also you can't, and that's why, when that when you asked me if I wanted to join, I was a little bit reluctant because, it's, to simplify something like, it's so individualistic, how you deal with it. But of course, there are methods to support people how to do it. But it's very important that you do feel the pain because you cannot force happiness after trauma. You have to understand what happened, and then you gradually will be more okay.
So why they should go through the pain then? to make it short, just for them to understand better.
Because then we talk about healthy recovery and unhealthy recovery. And unhealthy recovery is when you pretend that it doesn't exist.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Pretending. So therefore, that means that pretending is not a solution. It's just the instant relief as such, kind of, by having other addictions and substitutions. That's what I meant. But then it's still there. It always be there. And going through the pain, as we just mentioned earlier, that actually this can reach the awareness of actually having a problem. That means the pain in itself as such, that is within you. It's not that if you change the place or the country or the city, whatever, the pain just disappear, poof. It's not a bullet, and you are not a bulletproof, right? So it's just that I personally believe that there is no other way that going through it, directly through it.
But it also very much depends on the person, right? If this has been your coping mechanism all your life to avoid things, then you will work with what does that mean, and how do you start, looking at things that you have avoided. So it is very, you have to look at the individual and see what layers are there.
What does real healing look like beyond coping and adapting then?
And we are talking always in the context of international theory.
Yeah.
But real healing and coping. I mean, real healing, I think that's more, like a metaphysical development psychology. There are different life phases where it's expected that you will have challenges, right? The first major life crisis is adolescent. They don't really have that many coping skills, and they also have hormones who are uncontrollable. So they are, their life crisis is very intense. And then you have the establishing age, where you after uni, and because adolescent is like exploration, right? Who am I? What do I want to do with my life? And then you have the establishing age when you finished your degree, and then you start,
exploring.
Meeting a partner, thinking about children, where to live, and all those things, right? And then you have, midlife, where you sort of consider your life. Is this where you want to be in your life, and do you want to make some different decisions? And also, if children, then usually they are also on their own at that time, so you can sort of redirect everything towards yourself again. And then you have after 50s, that's where you sort of start thinking about retirement age, and then last is this is the end of life. What does that look like, where you look very much back to life? So I think in the sense of like what real healing look like, if that would be something like, okay, there are different life phases, and in different life phases I can expect that there will be challenges or crises. So these are the expected life challenges. And then you have unexpected life challenges, like COVID. That was unexpected, a life crisis that was globally, and everybody was hit by it. So how do you deal with something like that was unexpected? Or if you lose somebody earlier in your life, then that's also unexpected. So there are like expected and unexpected life crises, and in those, how do you work with in capturing them?
Why is so hard for high-performing people to acknowledge trauma and or ask for help?
Well, I don't actually. I see the opposite.
Really?
Yes, at least the one, obviously, the people who come with me is often because there's a problem. Um, but I think what makes my job so rewarding is that to work with high achievers also means that they want to be high achievers in all aspects of their life. And that also applies to mental health. So if there's something that sort of is a disturb them or is off, then they reach out and 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 then when you work with them, it's a beautiful work because they are obviously it's different when you work private practice. People come because they want to have help. If there are times where I worked in organizations, they didn't really want to come of their own will, so it's a different situation. But when you do, I think with high achievers, it's wonderful, and because they are competent people, it's also the recovery rate is really high, and then there's also different ways of using counseling as an international, because I have the people who move around from place to place, like usually a 2-year, 3-year contracts, or sometimes 5-year contracts, have stayed with me for many years since I started, because it sort of becomes an anchor in a more abrupt lifestyle, and then you don't have to start all over again. And that's very interesting, right? Because and that's a lot of Americans have this. They use this as a like mental health check-in and preventive work, and of course there are things as well. But it's I think it's very smart to do it, especially when you do know that when you live a transition lifestyle, there are times where you will be more stressed than if you stayed in your country of origin. Then you have the Europeans. They are more like, I have a problem, needs to be solved.
Oh my God, thank you for sharing all this. Yeah, I'm so interested.
And then, of course, you have cultures where it's more stigmatized to talk about mental health, and that's also very interesting to work with those cultures. For example, if like for example in India, it's not, but you have a mega huge talent pool from India, especially the Bangalore, Silicon Valley, and the more the young professionals there that I see are so smart and so willing to change things, and that's amazing. And I can say all this because my clients are worldwide. I'm not only centered around Denmark, so nobody can identify my clients anyway.
What is one emotional habit in particular that often holds people back from feeling grounded in a new country?
First of all, if people decide to live in a new country, then they are very often in for it, and know that it comes with challenges, and it comes with a time factor, that it will take time to meet people where you can mirror yourself in and where you feel a connection. So but if you move and you don't really want to move, then that's where it can be really challenging.
That's so interesting, this perspective. I love it. So how can therapy at this point, or coaching, help rebuild confidence when someone feels lost?
Well, as I mentioned, very often I worked very structurally, so then we can structure this as, you might feel lost in this specific situation. You might not feel lost here, And how can you build a bridge between these two worlds, for example? That could be one approach. But often it's also about making sure that the person reconnect with themselves.
I would like to ask you, please, can you give us 2 ways to build and develop resilience to stop procrastination?
Well, it goes back to
2, not 10, 2. So we can, so you can help us. 2 ways of building and develop resilience to stop procrastination.
Okay, but that goes back
Please.
to the healthy perfectionism and unhealthy perfectionism. Procrastination and perfectionism very often goes hand in hand. I think the rest would be recovery. Procrastination is avoid doing things that you should do at a timely manner.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously it's recovery. And because if you have been very stressed for a long time, your nervous system is like a rubber band, right? It's almost like so tight that you can't relax. So you need to make sure that your nervous system relaxes so the rubber band is not so tight. And a way of doing that is, for example, relaxing on the couch. But it's also, for example, walking. Walking is very healthy. For example, if you're stressed and you are used to running and this is how you cope, which is a really good thing. But if you are close to burnout, you should do exercise that are calmer. Because if you're already producing a lot of adrenaline and you keep adding more adrenaline, that's when you can burn out. But if you are, so that's why you have to inbuild calmer things to do. And that's also why, mindfulness and body scans and all those things have become so popular, because in the Western world, a lot of people are quite stretched.
So very true.
Yeah.
So, Sidsel, I have one final reflection. I call it a note to your past health ritual, which can be also a little bit tiny, slightly bit more personal. If you could go back and sit with your younger self, the version of you just starting this journey as a psychologist or expat counselor, what would you tell her?
Yeah, well, I'm a counselor. I'm a psychologist counselor. Well, I mean, if I should go way back, I don't even remember what I should tell myself, but I was thinking on when I repatriated to Denmark after, many years abroad. I was so keen to fit into the Danish society, because I was like, oh, okay, I'm going back to Denmark. I built my private practice in Moscow. I had very good case load. I was working with the World Bank, UN, and a lot of embassies and things like that. And I had to start all over when I moved back to Denmark, because of course it was before COVID, so I didn't know if my clients would follow online. Now it's normal to do online counseling, so it's fine. But so I was like, okay, I'm moving back to Denmark, so I just have to do like the Danes, because otherwise I wouldn't fit in. And I'm even a Dane, right? So I can understand what it means for internationals. So I took a job, in a full-time job in an organization doing counseling, and I started, very quickly after I arrived, and if I did even have that possibility not to, because I had a family that I was also moving back. So I was working full-time plus doing private practice and making sure that my family would cope okay with it. So I would, if I should say something to that self, don't do that again.
Really? Don't do that in the sense that don't come back in Denmark? Or
No, I would definitely not want to stay in Russia right now. But no, don't. Don't go back and do something just to fit into a social construction that might not fit you. And I think that's why I also love working with internationals, right? That yes, I'm Danish. I've lived out of Denmark six times. You know, my whole life is very international. A lot of my best friends are all over the world. So I do the same as my clients. I have the same life as my clients. But I'm also Danish, and when I came back, I was like, oh, I have to act like a Dane, and it made me miserable because it was.
I'm so curious about this. Please, in just a short sentence, please explain me. How did you felt?
But I felt. So you talk about reverse culture shock.
Yeah.
And I was, remember we were going on a conference out of Denmark, and we had to take the train to the airport, and I didn't know how to use and my American colleague, she said, well, my fellow Dane, you need to use this card to so I was just as lost as everybody, but obviously I look very Danish and I speak the language and I am Danish, so
but you still can be lost somehow, even in small things.
Yeah, but also, and I think this is important, we didn't want to go back. We were not done with adventures lifestyle, because for us it was an adventure. We thought it was so great to live in we lived in so many other countries, but the last place, right? Our children went to this top international school. We had, still had friends all over the world. We were traveling to places that we usually wouldn't go to from Denmark, and we were not done. And I think that's also makes a huge difference, that we didn't want to go back. We wanted to continue adventure, as we call it in our family.
Even though you had the kids, you still you were willing to go in this adventure, kind of life adventure, because it is also an adventure, it's true.
Because I could see that my kids benefited it much more from being international school system than in the system that you were in Denmark. Because the way that I wanted my children to be, I wanted my children to have high cultural competence. I wanted my children to have friends from all over the world. I wanted my children to constantly be questioned of, is this, the way that I live, is that, are there other ways I can live? Are there other truths? Are there other ways of doing things? Because I think that's very healthy for a human being to be like that. So, and luckily my children, are all over the world now, and and have friends all over the world. But I think that makes a huge difference, right? Do you want to move to where you're going? Or are you not done with whatever you're doing, right? At least this is from personal experience, right?
I do believe, as you just mentioned earlier a second ago, that it's such an important point to reflect upon before you are actually taking the responsibility to go abroad, no matter if it's for a personal or a professional reason. Either way, I think it's important to do a reset as a mindset.
So why when in 2022 I made this group, which is called Expats in Hornbæk, and we have there's 450 members now, and every month I arrange a dinner at a hotel for people like me or you with common mindset. And the next dinner is dinner number 35. So it's a recurrent event, and it's so nice because it's internationals, and you don't have to explain all those things, right? You can laugh about the travel card, you didn't know how to use it, but you can also talk about that you miss your friend in Korea, and it's lovely because it's also now that people talk about this making friends, right?
Yeah.
Building relationship takes time.
Yeah,
and I could see that when I talk to people about loneliness, then I was like, okay, I need to not only talk about it on a structural level, I also need to make something where they can go and build relationships. And it's wonderful because it's a monthly recurrent event, and people, come when possible. Then we also make friends, and it's so nice to see.
Definitely. So, Sidsel, if someone wants to reach out to you, where actually they can find you?
Yeah, on my website, Expat Counseling, and on LinkedIn. And then you're welcome. Everybody's welcome to join that Expats in Hornbeck group as well, which is the only criteria is that you have to have an international open mindset and have lived abroad.
Yeah. So wonderful. Thank you so very much. It was a pleasure, and I'm really thankful again for having you today. I've been hunting you, as you know, for a long time, and finally I succeeded. Away from me. Yeah, thank you, Bea. I really appreciate it. It means a lot, very much. You were a really important piece of the puzzle in order for me to have you here today. So thank you.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
You're welcome. What we can take from today's conversation is that trauma doesn't just live in the past. It lives in the body, in patterns, and in the way we try to survive change. And healing isn't about fixing ourselves, but about learning to feel safe again, to understand what we carry, and to choose new ways of living. To everyone listening, if something in you was touched today, take it gently. You are not broken. You are human, and you are allowed to heal at your own pace. So if you want to reach out to Sidsel, you can do it on expatcounseling.me or on her LinkedIn profile, Sidsel Byskov Hansen. Please support Rewire to Rise by subscribing to the channel. It will mean a lot to me. Until next time, stay sharp.